So please welcome to the stage, Gretchen Pleuss.
So this particular concert is presented in conjunction with Roots of American Music. Roots of American Music is also known as ROAM by its acronym. It's a nonprofit established in 1999, and it's based in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. ROAM integrates music and education in Northeast Ohio to create vibrant communities through art and vibrant art through community. More information on ROAM and ways for you to support them can be found at rootsofamericanmusic.org. And you can also visit the ROAM table by the entrance of the Bop Stop. So there is some more information over there as well by the entrance. Special thanks to Ohio Arts Council and Cuyahoga Arts and Culture for their support as well. And let's get started. So through this Lift Their Voices series, we musicians were also given historical figures in music that are important to American music. So my particular figure that I'm featuring tonight is Buffy Saint-Marie. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Buffy. Excellent. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about what Buffy brings to the table and how she has impacted folk music in particular and also her communities, which is a huge part of her music. So I do have some notes because I get nervous when I'm talking and not when I'm singing, which makes no sense. So some of the notes that I have here are basically Buffy Saint-Marie was named Beverly when she was born. She was born in 1941 in Saskatchewan, Canada, on the Piapot Reservation. Unfortunately, her mother died in a car crash, and she was actually adopted by a couple and raised in Massachusetts and Maine. So that's how she ended up in America. But because of her indigenous heritage, she continued to put that into her music and into her life's work. Her mother was of Cree descent, which is where the Piapot Reserve, it's a Cree reservation as well. So she was always sort of pulled to music as a child. She started out on piano, but she moved to guitar in her teenage years. And it wasn't until the 60s that she decided to move to New York to sort of be a part of the Greenwich Village scene, Bob Dylan and other folk namesakes. So in 1963, actually, in the New York Times, there was a critic that caught one of her sets and called her one of the most promising new talents on the folk scene. And from that one review, she actually landed essentially a record deal to make her first album, which is called It's My Way. And on It's My Way, you can recognize some of her more notable songs like Now That the Buffalo's Gone, which is a critical account of America's mistreatment and systemic erasure of Native peoples. So she didn't really shy away from talking about things that affected indigenous nations, and that ultimately one of the sad parts about that is that because it became such an integral part of her music, she was blacklisted. So she became very involved in movements such as the American Indian movement, which is notably they helped occupy Alcatraz when there was an occupation of Alcatraz, which went on for, I want to say, 60 days. It was a long time. So they occupied essentially the prison cells in Alcatraz to bring awareness to the fact that was originally indigenous land. And so it was sort of the origin of the land back movement, which you might recognize now, which was where indigenous people were basically bringing attention to the fact that treaties were broken and that they had ancestry in this land, and they wanted to have that land back. So she was blacklisted not just for the American Indian movement, but also because she was very much involved in anti-war protests, and that's also in her music. You might recognize Universal Soldier. It was a big song of hers, which was on, I believe, her second album, Little Wheel Spin and Spin, which also had My Country, 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying, which is one of my favorite songs of hers, personally. I think it's just a really brilliant lyrical song. And that one in particular is about, again, sort of whitewashed history. So it was around that time that things became there was more awareness being brought to the fact that indigenous peoples had not just been assimilated, but actually originally, there was genocide. So Buffy Saint-Marie did not shy away from speaking of that. Even in interviews, she was sort of pushed back. She wasn't allowed to come on Johnny Carson until Sam Belafonte actually was interviewing her. So she wasn't given as much media exposure as she would have been had she not been talking about those things. And I also believe, and I think she would speak to this as well, that as an indigenous woman in particular, she sort of became, and she talks about this openly in a podcast I listened to by CBC, which she had some interviews with them talking about how as an indigenous woman in particular, there was this sense that she had to be sort of docile, and she could be pretty and talk about things that affected indigenous people, but not in a way that made anybody else uncomfortable. And because she refused to sort of adhere to those standards and the society's expectations on that, she ended up really pushing a lot of people away. But she stuck with that, and she did take a long hiatus, but she came back in 1992 with a record that included some really interesting synth sounds, and she, sort of bridged that gap between this synthy, poppy thing that was going on in the 80s and 90s and her more traditional fingerstyle folk background. So yeah, I think one of the interesting things to me about Buffy is that she has never relented what is important to her, and I think that is what makes her a really impactful person, but also a very impactful artist, because it takes a lot of salt to sort of stick to what you believe in and to be passionate and stay with that. And that is something that I have personally felt very connected to her, especially in doing more research into her life and her life's work. I knew her songs, from growing up. My parents would occasionally play Buffy, but I hadn't heard a lot of her discography because, like I said, I don't think it was given as much attention by the media back in the day as it could have been. But I'm really impacted personally by the fact that she cares deeply about, justice and about people and about, her people, which for her it's, indigenous peoples. So I do want to take a moment too, because we're talking about Buffy. This is something that I've been doing. One of the things that I relate to her on is her, like I said, commitment to justice and to bringing attention to oppression. And so, like in my work, I also work in nonprofit work as well, like Roots of American Music. I believe it's important to acknowledge Native peoples and the fact that we are on their land and that we did break treaties. And I say we collectively, as you understand. I'm talking about the fact that this was originally land that was occupied and they were forced out. So I did want to actually do a land acknowledgement, if that's okay. If everybody's okay with that?
Yeah.
So I did research the tribes that are from this area originally, and this is what a land acknowledgement looks like. I do this at work as well, so this is sort of, if you ever want to do this in your own settings, I think it's a really, it's a very bare minimum thing to do, I suppose, but it's very important because we at least acknowledge the fact that we're here. We acknowledge that we are gathering today on the lands of the Haudenosaunee peoples and the Anishinaabe peoples, also commonly known as the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Ottawa nations. So, without further ado, I'm going to play a song of mine that I feel like is personally sort of inspired by Buffy, by other folk artists as well that have been talking about things that are in our American history. So in this song of mine, it's called One for All, and it's about essentially how our American history, the way that we talk about America. I think we love America. Everybody from America naturally loves America. I don't think it matters, what your background is. I think a lot of people, unless, I don't want to say that we love America in the sense of in a patriotic way necessarily. It's not that we love, for indigenous peoples, like I said, for them they have a different connotation of government. They have a different connotation of America, and I believe that is completely valid. But as a nation, we love each other. We love what we say that we stand for. We love the idea of freedom. We love the idea of being a collective nation and having the American dream that we can pursue. We all love these values, but we don't always paint them in a way that acknowledges our origins and also the people that can easily be left behind because they already have so many obstacles that they were born with. So that's what this song is about. I sort of reference a few different demographics. This song is the last song on my album that came out in 2019, Daughter of the Broader Skies. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I know CDs aren't necessarily a huge thing anymore, but you are welcome to get one from me later.
Everybody's got lead and steel, but God forbid you behind the wheel. If your skin is brown as cedar grain, if the courts mispronounce your name, you can work in a grocery store. To pay for college you can go to war. We'll throw you parties when you get back home, and 5 years later say the war was wrong. That's the way that it's always been done. They're singing one for all and all for one, to drown the sound of you saying I can't breathe. There's no justice in reprieve. One man acquitted and one to grieve. Were you born on infertile land? Once a village, now a casino stands. They scoff at the whiskey on your breath, your minor infractions and petty theft. Remember when they put your parents there, gave them Bibles and cut their hair. You've seen the unmarked graves that wounded me. You're not in prison, but you still aren't free. That's the way that it's always been done. They're singing one for all and all for one, to drown the sound of you singing when they reach on you. They'll put the pipeline where they please. The eagle is screeching in the east. I may have been born in a trailer park. I may have been poor, but I was never dark. So how can I sing for someone I never knew? I would hope that he'd sing for me too. What good's a voice if you don't use it? What good is progress if you refuse it? What makes you think that we're so different, that you can't relate 'cause you never lived it? That's the way that it's always been done. They're singing one for all and all for one, to drown the sound of you screaming I'm still here. My skin is black as yours is fair. I never recited the Lord's Prayer. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm thinking about Buffy too, one of the other things that I really appreciate about her is that she, it wasn't just that she was often painted as sort of this angry woman, angry Indigenous woman, and that was really unfair because a lot of what she wanted to do was just educate, and I think that's why this sort of series is important. I think, we need to know where people were actually coming from versus how they were portrayed, and, why their legacy matters. So Buffy, for instance, was Sesame Street. You might remember in Sesame Street in the 1970s. The producers actually called her up, and I thought this was an interesting story. They called her up and they said, hey, would you come out and do an episode, maybe do like the alphabet with the Muppets? And she was like, I'm not flying out there to do the alphabet. And then they were like, okay. And then she said, have you ever had an Indigenous, episode before where you feature things that are uniquely Indigenous? And they said, no, we haven't. Let me call you back. And then they hung up, and then they called back about a week later and said, we have an idea. What if you came out and were a semi-regular cast member and you did some educational bits on Indigenous culture? So that's sort of how she became a staple on Sesame Street for a while. And she pitched that idea. And in doing so, she actually brought awareness to things that people had otherwise, gone, their whole lives maybe without thinking about. But also she represented all of these Indigenous children that then were watching Sesame Street, and it was, the first time that they were seeing maybe themselves represented on TV. And I think that was very important. So I remember that's how I first knew about Buffy, was Sesame Street. I remember watching the reruns and I remembered seeing her sing, thought, wow, she's a beautiful woman, but also what a beautiful voice. And it wasn't until later that I understood sort of the magnitude of what she actually accomplished, even on Sesame Street. So, all that to say, never underestimate that what you do is important, even if it seems like it's not very important in the moment. I'm sure in the moment she thought she was just turning down Sesame Street. This next song is actually about, it's a song that's newer, and I'm releasing it in March, so if you follow me online, you'll get to hear it there. This is about writing songs that are important to me. Sometimes, they're personal, but sometimes they're also about something I'm observing in the world, and I think that's part of art, is that you observe and then you put it into a medium that you're comfortable with. And, in doing so, sometimes people aren't going to agree, and that's okay. But I think I was told one time to stop doing it, and it made me just write the song instead.
stir the pot till it's hot, till it's hot. You can stir the pot till it's hot, till it's hot. You can stir that pot until it's hot, till it's hot. You can stir that pot, stir that pot. They say stay in your lane, just be selfish, just be vain, for the sake of your brand name, for the sake of someday fame. No one cares to make a change, no one cares to share the blame, no one cares you got a brain, no one cares. So I paint my face and be quiet. Maybe then you will buy it.
I feel like after two sort of heavy songs, it's probably best to bring you back up a little bit. So here's a song about being lonely. A uniquely human feeling. This one's called Everybody's Pretty. That last one was called Stir the Pot. I don't think I mentioned that.
Staring at my legs. He says I'm unlike anyone he's known before. Unequal parts love and war. I'm not a connoisseur, so says Kate. There's parts of me learn to hate. There's parts of me I already hate. Though I hold him and he already let him go. One I love is still in Ohio. But freedom is lonely, and so is the city where everybody's lonely, 'cause freedom is lonely, and so is this city where everybody's lonely, 'cause everybody's pretty. Everybody's pretty. Everybody's pretty. Everybody's pretty.
Thanks so much, you guys. I bought a watch recently, which I feel like nobody has watches anymore because they all have phones. Although the phones are now in the watches, so I hear. I refuse to get one because I don't want anybody to know that they can get a hold of me. So this is just a basic watch, but it feels so much better than pulling out my phone. Now you guys know I'm not trying to text anybody. Alright, I wrote this next song about, I was reading a book called The Lost City of Z, and Percy Fawcett is the, I don't want to say the main character, but he is sort of the person followed in the book. Percy Fawcett was an explorer in the early 1900s that went missing, and it's still a big mystery about what happened to him and his son. Personally, I feel like if you go out in the middle of the jungle, I don't know. There's no way to tell what's going to happen to you. So it's a huge mystery, and it was a very fascinating book. And I thought more so his life was fascinating, and the type of person that he was really interesting. But the mystery to me is how it's a mystery, because I don't really, like I said, having been to only the buffer zone of the Amazon, that was enough. So, they have very, very large cats. That being said, I think people that aren't really afraid of death are very interesting to me. They're very interesting. I used to not be afraid of death. And I think that's part of being, under 25. Unless you're Percy Fawcett, in which case you have arrested development. But honestly, people like that are very interesting to me because they tend to do really amazing things in life because they aren't afraid of living it to its full extent. So I wrote this song about that feeling. Searching for my heart in some foreign land, a person only Percy Fawcett would understand. Floating down river in some harsh terrain, I feel at ease while any other would go insane. 'Cause there are splendors only God himself would know. If we never ventured, if we chose not to go, most people cower when the future is unclear. But a scripted future is the only thing I fear. I dream of mountains, I dream of trees, I dream of everything but husband and babies. I've got no money, I can't hold a job, 'cause there's
the future is the only thing I fear.
Thank you. Cheers. Is that Gooby? Can't see under the lights. So this one's for Gooby. All right, I have a couple more for you. I always write set lists and then I never follow them. This is never, yeah, exactly. They're suggestions. I don't think I follow rules very well either. So, thanks for trusting me on the stage tonight. I think I'm going to do this next one is actually a newish one. I haven't recorded it just yet, so if you like it, that's too bad. Maybe someday. This is a song about falling in love and how terrifying of a feeling that can be. And say that the butterflies that you feel in your stomach, that's like the common sense leaving your body. It's like floating away. So that's how I feel when I'm on the verge of falling in love. It's sort of like there's impending doom. I don't know if that's how everybody else feels, but that's how I feel. So this one is called Stray Cat.
Everything I do seems to hurt someone, and everything I've ever done, leaving coffee on the pot until it catches fire, burning ants out in the sun. Scratching at my bedroom door. I've never had a reason not to turn my back. I've never felt like that before. I've been stocking up on seeds in case I plant a garden. You don't know what that's about until you search for food all day to find it's in your stomach, until you're drinking in a drought. Scratching at my bedroom door. I've never had a reason not to turn my back. I've never felt like that before.
depression setting in.
Or it's just a good song.
Who can tell?
It's a good song.
Alright, I'm going to try this next one. I just put this song out last month. This one's called Hills Are on Fire. This is just a side note. So one of Buffy's songs on that 1992 record that she put out almost didn't make it to the album. It was called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. The record label was like, no, we don't really want that. And she was like, well, it has to go on there. So it went on there. And it's a great song. It's sort of, in traditional, she talks about the history of oppression for Native peoples. But she also, it sort of takes on this vibe of being an anthem and like an empowering, we can, we're still here, we're still no one got rid of us, we're here. So I think it's a really beautiful song, and like I said, Buffy is of Cree descent, but Wounded Knee is actually a massacre that happened in Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. So Wounded Knee was it was a massacre in the 1800s. That's the way to call it, it's Wounded Knee Massacre. But so it's one of the most famous ones. There's a very famous book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown. Having been to Wounded Knee and to Pine Ridge Reservation, there's a really stark, it's a stark feeling to look at Wounded Knee, where it's unmarked graves, and it's not all exhaustive. There's only a few crosses, there's just a few graves, and to know how many people are actually out there unmarked, women and children, and men. It's just a really stark feeling, and it's such a stark place. So if you've never been to the Badlands or the Black Hills, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place, but also really desolate. And I think that really kind of captures the essence of life as an indigenous person too. On the reservation, it's the land is beautiful, but it's also, like I said, desolate. And I think that sort of, to me, as an artist, when I look at something, landscapes, when I look at nature, when I look at a building even, it has an emotion tied to it. So that's the emotion. I go back actually to South Dakota basically once a year, and I wrote this song based on the feeling I get now that I go there every year, about the hills and about the Badlands. To me now it's become sort of a feeling of like the outside world sort of melts away, and it becomes a sense of home, and not just home in the sense of the landscape and the place itself, but how I feel with myself when I'm there. So this song captures that feeling of returning to your inner self and your inner child, and creating a space for home, even if you don't necessarily have a home. And I think my roundabout point that I'm getting to here is that there's a sense of being displaced that is a part of indigenous culture, because they are displaced peoples. They just like it's similar to a refugee experience. I don't want to say it's similar because it's a totally separate experience, but the feeling of being displaced is a feeling that I can never personally have. However, I have also had to create my own sense of home, and I think that when you are in a place like South Dakota, it forces you to find that sense of home in yourself. So this one is called Hills Are on Fire, which is how they look at sunrise and sunset, because you can see so far.
spits me out, it delivers me back to you. Watch the sky opening doors. Those stars are yours to guide you home. Keep the night deep in my brain. It's keeping me sane when I'm alone. And love swells me like a river, spits me out, it delivers me back to you. Me back to you. Oh, so brand new. Back to you. Back to you. So brand new. Back to you. Back to you. Back to you. Back to you. Back to think the silent hills are on fire. Never grow tired of letting go. Thank you so much.
Alright, so this next one is called Open Door. And there's not really a story with this one, I guess. It's just about love lost, which I think is a very human experience too. This one's called Open Door.
It's always an open door. I said it before, you can come and go. I never say what I want, I'm never blunt, I'm both yes and no. You're every fear exposed, every takes and goes on a hardwood floor. What you looking for? What can we share if you're never there? I thwarted 50 states for Stan Hewitt's gates in my first light show. I wouldn't take it back, though I'd taken flag in the afterglow. Nostalgia has its way with me. The past has its allure. Though I count the days like sheep, I don't sleep like I did before. And when I do, I dream of you pouring 2 glasses of wine. And when I wake, I have to shake the hope that one of them is mine. No, not this time. There was never a win. Just now and then. It's always an open door. I've said it before. You can come and go. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I got time for 1 or 2 more. I gotta say thank you guys so much for coming tonight. It's nice to see all of these familiar faces. Alright, so this next one I actually I wrote about a couple years ago about Syrian refugees. So it got my head thinking. We were talking about displaced peoples, and especially now considering the earthquake and everything that happened, it's just been on my mind with Turkey and Syria. So this was one I wrote when essentially what was going on is, there was an influx of Syrian refugees, and we were, preparing to turn them away, and we did turn them away. And I got to thinking about, just how many times America is really good about, letting refugees in. I don't want to discredit that. However, I just feel like, we get this panic. I think there's always a panic when there's a big global crisis, and we kind of go into panic mode and say, no, shut down the, close up shop. We can't let anybody else in. And the reality is, if we don't let them in, then where do they go? And that is, I think, when we're talking about Statue of Liberty, when people see the Statue of Liberty, that's supposed to say, come on in, and you're welcome here, no matter where you're from or what you're going through. That's the America that I like to believe in. And I wrote this song about that, in particular about borders and how we get wrapped up into being countries, and we forget that at the root of it all, we're all people. We're people with families and loved ones, and we care about each other. And if it was your family, you would want somebody to treat you with that empathy and respect. So this one's called Borders. this is our fault. Faces of strangers, the question of when. So give him your masses, you're poor and you're meek. He'll lend you his hand, but Sam's grip is weak. He'll lend you his hand, but Sam's grip is weak. They look nothing like you and yours. It makes it easy to justify these wars. Living on water, living on salt. Those are our children, and this is our fault. This is our fault. You look nothing like us and ours. It makes it easy to justify these powers. Living on money, living on fear. We're just children, and that much is clear. That much is clear. Thank you guys. I appreciate you listening.
Circle gig.
You what?
Circle gig.
Oh, I wish.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Well, universal soul.
I thought about covering some of Buffy's songs, but I didn't have enough time to prepare to the preparation that I wanted to present it, because I feel like her songs are so powerful, and if you drop the ball, I don't pull it off as well. This has been a challenge in a good way, because for me, as a white woman, it is hard to speak for an Indigenous woman, because that's such a different experience, and I don't want to take away from that. So that's also I've been a little bit nervous about it, because for as much as I like to believe that I champion Indigenous rights, and some of my closest friends are Indigenous, I never want to speak for them. And I think that's what I like about Buffy so much, is that she doesn't allow you to really speak for her. She speaks for herself. And that's sort of the impact she's had on not only her own, people, Indigenous peoples, but also the impact she's had on music. I think that she taught a lot of
women of color and other indigenous women in particular that they could take up space. So I don't want to take away from that. All right, so I think I'm going to play. Do I have time for one more? Where's George? There you are. Should I do one more?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate it. You've been really great. Make sure I'm in tune for this last one. Don't want to leave you on a sour note. Okay, so this last one I'm going to play is off of my record from 2019, Daughter of the Broader Skies. It's called Sheepish, which is really hard to say, and I recognize that in retrospect that naming a song Sheepish is not very kind to anybody that wants to repeat it. But it's about, again, sort of that feeling of being afraid of saying what is right. So sometimes saying what is right and doing what is right is the hardest thing to do and say, and that's where this is coming from. So I was touring in the South, and I love the South. I think it's amazing. But there is sort of this politeness, the Southern politeness that you have to adhere to, and I think that sometimes other things need to be said. So I was traveling on Martin Luther King days when this song actually sort of came to me. And I won't go into detail, but the place that I was supposed to stay fell through, and I ended up just going to a hotel, and it was late at night. It was like a day's in. And the lady at the front desk, she was so sweet. She was, a little older, and she instantly, was like, let's get you a room. And she saw my guitar, and she was like, oh my gosh, you play guitar? And I was like, yeah. And she said, would you put on a concert for, everybody down here? And I was like, there's nobody down here. And I looked, it was just us, and it was like 11 p.m. And she was like, okay, you come back in half an hour, and I will have a crowd out here. So I went in to my hotel room that she, let me into, and I was sitting there, and I was like, she couldn't be serious, Next thing I know, like a half an hour later, I get a phone call in the hotel room, and I answer it, and she's like, hello, it's Phyllis. I have a crowd for you down here, so I know that you're watching probably Jeopardy like me, but come on in, and so I went into the lobby and played for like 10 people, including her. And I remember it was such a beautiful, like very spontaneous experience. But one of the ladies that was there was just getting off of her shift. She was one of the people on the cleaning team, and she was really emotional. And I overheard, I was talking to her and Phyllis, and I overheard them, basically going back and forth, and they hugged, and then the lady left, and Phyllis was like, well, she's got to go home to her son because he's getting locked up tomorrow for the foreseeable future, and just to iterate for the story, they both were black women, and this woman that was leaving, she was just so emotional, and I started thinking about it, like about how justice works in this country too, and how we have a long way to go in regard to, I don't know his story, I have no idea what her son did or what he had done, but I did think about the experience that is different for white families versus black families, and especially in the South. So I was thinking about all of these things as I'm on tour, and it just happened to be that was the night before Martin Luther King Day. And so I wrote this song the next day, just thinking about how far we've come, and yet how far we have to go when it comes to acknowledging the sort of reciprocal or the residual effects of systemic racism in this country. So this is called Sheepish, and it's about being able to acknowledge those things so that we can move forward and be better to all people. And acknowledging our mistakes is going to say that we are weak or that we aren't a great country. I think that it just means that we have work to do.
From the Gulf of Alabama, from Montgomery to Atlanta, the bumper stickers match the textbook description of fabulous and South tradition. It's hard for me to collect my thoughts. I find it's easier to get lost. As we draw lines and we build walls. We've got the map but never look at it at all. Miss Lucy holds her son tight the night before. He's sentenced to 30 years or more. It's April 3rd here from the mountaintop. I'm searching for God at a truck stop, singing, Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want for wolves, though I lead this herd, I am still sheepish, and I'm still sleepless. I suppose our weakness is we won't think this. From Carolina to Virginia, there's not a trace or taste or hint of grace. She granted me in Mississippi in her home. This is for every woman who's ever felt alone, begging her boss, do you not see me? On her knees pleading, believe me, singing, Lord is my shepherd, I shall